He came home at midnight, certain he had gotten away with everything. 2 weeks in Europe, 5 cities. A woman who smelled like expensive perfume and bad decisions. Lucien Moretti had spent 14 days living a second life, and he had come back to his first one without a single apology prepared. He was the most feared man on the East Coast. He had buried rivals, broken empires, and made senators sweat in their pressed suits. He had never once been afraid of coming home. Until tonight. If this story already has you hooked, drop a like and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The town car rolled through the underground garage at 12:17 in the morning, tires whispering against the polished concrete like something trying not to be heard. Lucien Moretti sat in the back seat with his jacket folded across his lap, his collar open. The top 2 buttons undone in that particular way he allowed himself only when no one important was watching. His driver, a thick-necked man named Caruso, who had worked for the Moretti family for 11 years, and understood that silence was the most valuable thing he could offer, did not speak. He never spoke on late-night arrivals. He had learned that lesson early. Lucien stared at the concrete pillars sliding past the window. His mind was still in a hotel suite in Milan. White sheets, morning light coming through sheer curtains, Vivian's bare shoulder, the particular quiet of a room where no one expected anything from him. That was the thing about her. She never expected anything. She never tracked his movements or studied his face for signs of a lie. She laughed easily, asked for nothing, and understood that what they had existed in a separate world with its own rules and its own time zone and absolutely no connection to the life he kept locked behind a penthouse door 43 floors above the Manhattan skyline. He had told himself this for 8 months. He almost believed it. The elevator opened directly into the private foyer of his penthouse, a space designed to communicate power before a guest had taken 3 steps inside. Dark marble floors, a Basquiat on the wall that he had paid $900,000 for at auction and barely looked at anymore. Fresh flowers on the console table. White orchids, replaced twice weekly by a woman named Mrs. Huang, who came on Tuesdays and Fridays and never made eye contact. The air smelled faintly of the cleaning products his housekeeper used, something sharp and chemical beneath the flowers. And underneath that, the distant ghost of his wife's perfume, something soft and French, that cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent. He set his bag down, rolled his neck, felt the vertebrae crack in a way that was satisfying in the moment and would mean nothing by morning. The penthouse was quiet in the specific way that expensive spaces are quiet. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of perfect insulation, the world outside pressed flat against 3 inches of architectural glass. He had bought this silence deliberately. He had paid for it with years of work that had no legitimate name. He moved toward the bar first. That was always the ritual. Pour 2 fingers of the Armagnac he kept on the second shelf. Not the bottle he showed guests, the one behind it, the one with the handwritten label that had been a gift from a man in Bordeaux who owed him considerably more than wine. Stand at the window, look at the city, let the transition happen. The transition was something he had developed over years of living 2 lives. A few minutes at the window, drink in hand, city spread below, and he could feel the European version of himself folding away like a suit returned to its garment bag. The husband would come back. The boss. The man whose name meant something specific and dangerous in certain rooms. That man would step forward, and the other one, the one who laughed freely in hotel bars and said things he meant, would go quiet. It had always worked before. He poured the drink, turned toward the window, and then he saw the light under the study door. He stopped. The study was at the far end of the hallway, past the formal dining room that they used maybe 4 times a year and the guest suite that hadn't been occupied in 8 months. The door was solid mahogany, fitted with a lock whose key existed in only 2 places, on his personal key ring and in the small drawer in his dresser, where he kept things he considered absolutely private. The light under that door was the specific warm amber of the reading lamp on the left side of the desk, the one he used when he worked late, the one whose switch was not obvious to anyone who hadn't spent hours in that room. Serafina had been in that room maybe 3 times in 6 years of marriage. It was understood, without anything explicit ever being said, that the study was his. a boundary so established it had never needed words. He set the Armagnac down on the bar without drinking it, walked down the hallway, his footsteps silent on the runner. Another deliberate design choice, Persian wool that swallowed sound. The light under the door didn't move, didn't shift. Whatever was in there wasn't moving. He put his hand on the door, opened it. Serafina Vale Moretti sat behind his desk. She was wearing a dark silk robe, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, no makeup, which somehow made her look more formidable rather than less. She was 7 months pregnant, the curve of her belly visible even behind the wide mahogany desk, and she sat with her hands folded on the surface in front of her, completely still. The way a person sits when they have been waiting long enough that the act of waiting has become its own form of occupation. She was not reading, she was not on her phone. She was simply sitting in his chair, in his study, at his desk, looking at the door as though she had expected him to walk through it at exactly this moment. On the desk in front of her, screen facing up, lay a phone. Lucian's eyes went to it immediately. He couldn't help it. The reflex was involuntary, the way your eyes go to the thing you most don't want to see. It was the Samsung, the prepaid, the one he had been absolutely certain he'd lost in Prague 6 weeks ago. Dropped from a jacket pocket in a restaurant bathroom, he had told himself, gone, untraceable, problem solved. He had bought a replacement the next morning and not thought about it again. He was thinking about it now. "You're back," Serafina said. Her voice was even. No tremor, no particular emphasis on any word, just a statement of fact delivered in the tone of a woman who had decided some time ago exactly how this conversation would go. Lucian did not move from the doorway. "How long have you been in here?" he asked. "A while?" "Close the door," she said. "Please." He closed the door. He did not move further into the room. Something in his chest, not guilt, not quite, something older and more physical than guilt, was pressing against his sternum. He had spent 23 years building an instinct for danger. That instinct was currently sending signals his brain was still trying to organize into something he could act on. "That's not mine," he said, nodding at the phone. She looked at him for a moment without expression. Then she reached out and turned the phone over and slid it across the desk toward him, screen up. He saw the messages before he was close enough to read them properly. He didn't need to read them properly. He recognized the shape of them, the timestamps, the thumbnail of a photo he had sent in October, the particular abbreviated way Vivian spelled certain words because she had grown up bilingual and her English sometimes ran shortcuts. He stopped 2 feet from the desk. "I can explain." "I know you can," Serafina said. "You're very good at explaining things. Sit down." "I'll stand." "Sit down, Lucien." He sat. He was not a man who sat when told to sit. He had not sat when told to sit since he was 12 years old, and a Bronx juvenile court officer had tried to assert dominance in an intake room. He had a specific policy about it that had held for over 3 decades. He sat. She reached into the drawer to her left. His drawer, the one with the lock, which was somehow open, and she placed a manila folder on the desk, then a second one, then a third. She arranged them in a neat row without looking at them, the way a dealer lays cards when they know exactly what hand they're holding. "The first one is the messages," she said. "Printouts going back to March. The hotel in Geneva was when it started, I think, but I wasn't certain until April." Lucien looked at the folders and did not touch them. "The second is the photographs." She paused. "You might want to leave those closed for now. I've already seen them. I don't need you to feel embarrassed in front of me." The word embarrassed landed in the room with the weight of something much heavier than embarrassment. "The third is the financials." He looked up. "I've been thorough," she said, and for the first time something moved in her expression. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a kind of careful precision. The look of a person who is prepared for an examination and knows they're ready. "The accounts in Luxembourg. The Cayman structure. I know it's layered. It took me 4 months to map it properly. The Valdez arrangement and what it actually is. The transfers that went through the Meridian Trust in February and March, and what they were used for." She stopped. "I know I'm not supposed to know any of that. I've known for a long time." The room was very quiet. Lucien Moretti, who had sat across from men who wanted him dead and felt nothing beyond calculation, felt something that it took him several seconds to identify as fear. Who helped you? He said. It wasn't a question. It was the only thing that made sense to ask. No one who works for you, she said. Who? My brother did the initial financial analysis. He's a forensic accountant. You've always underestimated Marcus because he's quiet. She tilted her head slightly. Quiet people are usually the ones paying the most attention. Marcus Vale, her younger brother. Lucian had written him off years ago as a harmless, bookish, peripheral figure who showed up at holiday dinners and made small talk about college basketball. He had shaken the man's hand at 2 christenings and 1 anniversary party and never thought about him twice. And the rest, Lucian said. A private investigator in New Jersey, a second one in Milan. The phone was recovered from the lost property office at the restaurant in Prague. I had someone contact them 8 days after it disappeared. She paused. You left your full name in the reservation. You use your real name in restaurants you believe are beneath anyone's notice. That was a consistent pattern. He stared at her. He had been running criminal operations since he was 19 years old. He had coordinated international shipments worth 9 figures. He had managed networks of men who answered to him across 4 states and 2 continents. He had never once been investigated by someone who knew him this well. Why didn't you... He stopped, started again. You've had this for how long? The affair? I suspected in April, confirmed in June. The financials took longer. I had everything I have now by the end of October. That was 3 months ago. You didn't say anything. No. You were... He looked at her stomach, at the visible, undeniable reality of their child. You were carrying our daughter. You had all of this and you were making decisions, she said. Yes. The word decisions hung in the air between them like smoke. Lucien leaned back in the chair. He felt, in that moment, a strange telescoping sensation, the specific vertigo of a man who has spent years seeing the board clearly and has suddenly realized he was looking at the wrong board entirely. He had been playing one game. His wife had been playing a different one, on a different table, with different stakes, and she had been playing it longer. He was, for possibly the first time in his adult life, the one sitting across from someone who had more information than he did. What do you want? He said. She reached under the desk and lifted a document from her lap, a thick sheaf of papers bound with a blue legal cover. She placed it on the desk in front of him and turned it so the text faced him and did not push it closer. I had those drawn up in November, she said. My attorney reviewed the final version last week. He looked at the cover page without touching it. Petition for dissolution of marriage. You've already filed. Not yet. That's the copy for your review. She folded her hands again. I wanted to give you the opportunity to read them before I did. He opened the cover page. The terms were not what he expected. He had been married to a woman with access to attorneys who thought in the range of reasonable settlements, equitable distributions, the language of legal compromise. These terms were not that. These terms had been written by someone who understood not just the legal assets, but the shape of everything underneath them. He turned pages without fully absorbing the specifics. His mind was doing what it always did under pressure, scanning for leverage, for the countermove, for the place where someone had overextended and left themselves exposed. He couldn't find it. These numbers are accurate, she said. They reflect what I was able to document. The Cayman structure isn't... It's documented. Marcus is very thorough, and I have a second opinion from someone with experience in international financial crime. She let that phrase settle in the room. I'm not bluffing about what I know, Lucian. I wouldn't be sitting here if I were. He closed the document. Outside, 43 stories below, the city moved in its permanent restless way. Sirens in the distance, the low percussion of traffic, the indifferent machinery of a place that would continue existing regardless of what happened in this room. He had always found comfort in that sound. The city was something he understood, something that operated according to systems he had spent his life learning. His wife, it turned out, was a different kind of system entirely. I'm not signing this, he said. I thought you might say that. No one leaves a Moretti. That's not... I know the tradition, she said. I've been aware of it for 6 years. She paused. The families who enforce that tradition do so because the women in them don't know enough to make leaving safe. I'm not in that position. You're threatening me. I'm informing you of the situation, she said. Those are different things. A threat implies I intend harm. I don't intend any harm. I want a clean separation. The terms in that document give you a path forward that keeps the organization intact. If you contest it, she paused, just briefly. The information I have becomes significantly more dangerous in other people's hands. He looked at her for a long moment. He was trying to find the version of this he could control. He was looking for the angle, the pressure point, the human weakness in her position. He was doing what he always did, mapping a person's fear, identifying where they were soft, finding the place to push. And he was coming up empty. Because Serafina Vale Moretti, sitting in his chair, 7 months pregnant, in a silk robe with her dark hair loose, was looking back at him with the specific calm of someone who had already done the thing he hadn't managed to do. She had thought further ahead. "You'll want to have your own attorneys review the document," she said. "I'd suggest Hartley, not the firm you normally use for the business. They have a conflict here, and you should know that before you bring them in." She rose from the chair, slowly, carefully, one hand on the desk for balance. "I'm going to bed. I've been awake since 4 this morning." She moved toward the study door. "Sarah." She stopped, did not turn immediately. "How long did you know?" he asked. "Before you started the investigation. How long did you know something was wrong?" She turned then, looked at him. And for the first time all night, he saw something in her expression that wasn't calculation or control, something old and worn and tired, the specific exhaustion of a person who has been carrying something heavy for much longer than they should have been. "Since Geneva," she said. "April of last year. I found a receipt in your jacket pocket. It was from a perfumery." She stopped. "You don't wear cologne, and you hadn't brought me anything." He had bought Vivian a small bottle of something that cost 400 euros. He had brought it to her in a black gift bag with the store's ribbon on the handle. He could remember the specific pleasure Vivian had taken unwrapping it, the way she had laughed and kissed him and said he didn't have to. He had come home from that trip empty-handed and told Serafina that the customs had been difficult and he hadn't had time to shop. She had smiled, said it was fine, that she didn't need anything. "April of last year," he said. "That's 14 months, she said. "Yes." She opened the study door and walked out. He sat in the chair that she had vacated in his study, surrounded by his things, and stared at the 3 manila folders arranged in a neat row on the surface of his desk. 14 months. While he had been building a second life, his wife had been building something else entirely. He reached for the nearest folder, opened it. The printouts were meticulous. Dated, time-stamped, organized chronologically. Not just the messages, but the supporting documentation. Phone carrier records, hotel security footage stills that he recognized from 3 different properties across 2 countries. Photographs taken by what was clearly a professional surveillance specialist. There was a chain of custody notation at the bottom of each page, as though the whole collection had been prepared not just for his eyes, but for some eventual formal proceeding. He understood suddenly that his wife had not spent the last 14 months being hurt. She had spent them building a case. He turned to the 3rd folder, the financials. He opened it with more care, turned pages slowly, and felt the floor shifting under him with every page. She had it. All of it. Not just the surface structure. Anyone with a good accountant could get that far. But the layers. The Cayman entities and what they held. The Luxembourg accounts and where the transfers originated. The arrangement with Valdez, which was not a business relationship in any legitimate sense and which had never appeared on any document that bore his signature, but which she had somehow traced through a chain of intermediary transactions so meticulous it read like a textbook. She hadn't just investigated him. She had mapped the empire. He closed the folder, pressed both hands flat on the desk. The empire was his life's work. 23 years of construction, compromise and violence and loyalty earned and loyalty bought, and 1,000 small decisions that had added up to something enormous and powerful and real. He had protected it from rivals, from federal investigations, from the slow attrition of time and changing markets, and men who grew old or greedy or weak. He had protected it from everything. He had never thought to protect it from his wife. He reached for the phone, his actual phone, the personal one, not the Samsung on the desk, scrolled to a contact saved under a name that meant nothing to anyone who didn't know the system. A man named Ferraro, who handled situations that required a particular kind of discretion. He stared at the contact for 20 seconds. He put the phone down. There was nothing Ferraro could do here. The information existed. Serafina had copies. Her brother had copies. There was almost certainly a third set somewhere, held by someone Lucian couldn't identify or reach. If she disappeared, the information went forward automatically. She would have set it up exactly that way. She was, he understood now, not a person who had overlooked contingencies. She had thought of the contingencies before he had. He sat in the empty study for another hour. The Armagnac was still on the bar where he'd left it, untouched. Around 2 a.m, he heard her moving in the bedroom down the hall. The specific soft sound of a pregnant woman shifting in a bed, getting comfortable, settling. After a few minutes, silence. He looked at the document on the desk, at the 3 folders, at the Samsung phone that had risen from the dead. Tomorrow he would call his attorney. Not Hartley. She had known about the conflict, which meant she had researched his entire legal structure, which meant she knew more than he had allowed himself to consider until this moment. He would call someone clean, someone she hadn't already mapped. He would find the leverage. There was always leverage. In every situation, in every negotiation, in every confrontation, there was a place to put your weight and push. He had been doing this for 23 years. He had never been on this side of it before. At 3 a.m, he was still sitting at the desk when he heard it. A soft sound from down the hall, so quiet he almost missed it. Not crying, not quite. Something more controlled than crying. The particular sound of a person who has been holding something at a distance for a very long time and alone in the dark, in a moment they believed was private, lets it come a little closer. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. Then it stopped. Then there was nothing but the city below and the folders on the desk and Lucien Moretti sitting in a chair that still held the warmth of his wife's body, trying to find the angle on a situation that, for the first time in his life, appeared to have none. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten almost imperceptibly in the east. The first gray edge of a morning he was not ready for, coming regardless. His phone buzzed on the desk. He picked it up. A message. Not from a number he recognized. 4 words. She made other copies. He read it twice. The number was a New Jersey area code he didn't recognize. He would trace it by morning and find, almost certainly, a prepaid purchase with cash that had been activated once for this single message and would never be active again. He set the phone down very carefully, as though it were something that could break. Down the hall, the apartment was quiet. He looked at the document, at the blue legal cover, at his name printed in clean block letters beneath the words "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage," and under his name, her name, and the date. Not today's date, he noticed now. Not the date of their confrontation. A date from 3 weeks ago, when she had signed it in an attorney's office in a building he almost certainly walked past regularly without knowing what waited inside. She had signed it 3 weeks ago. She had sat across from him at dinner twice since then. He remembered one of those dinners now. She had asked him about the European trip, and he had given her the standard version, the cover story so practiced it came out smooth and automatic. She had nodded, asked about the food, seemed interested. She had already signed the papers. She had been watching him lie about a trip that she knew, to the specific hotel, to the specific floor, the specific room number, had included another woman, and she had listened to his lies with the patient attention of a person who understood that what he told her no longer mattered. She was already gone. She had been gone for months. He just hadn't known it yet. The phone buzzed again. A second message from the same number. 3 words this time. Don't do anything. He stared at it for a very long time. And for the first time in 23 years, Lucien Moretti, the most feared man on the East Coast, the man whose name could stop conversations in empty rooms and move money across international borders with a single call, sat with his hands flat on a desk in an empty room and understood that the instructions he was being given were not a request. They were the only move he had left. The message sat on his phone screen for 4 minutes and 11 seconds before Lucien put the device face down on the desk. He knew because he watched the clock on the wall the entire time. The one his father had given him, a German-made thing, mechanical, no battery, wound every Sunday morning. His father had carried it out of a burned apartment in the Bronx in 1974 and treated it with more care than he had treated most people. Lucien had inherited the clock and the habit of watching it during moments when his mind needed something external to anchor to. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Don't do anything. He turned the phone back over. looked at the number again. New Jersey area code. He was already running the contact list in his head. People who might know, people who might be watching, people Serafina could have reached who existed in the peripheral world where his operations touched legitimate infrastructure. An attorney, an accountant, someone from her brother's network, someone who understood exactly what doing something would look like and wanted to make sure he understood the cost. He opened a fresh text message, typed the number in, stared at the blank composition field, closed it without sending anything. At 4:15 in the morning, he left the study and walked to the kitchen and stood at the refrigerator with the door open for almost a full minute, looking at the contents without seeing them. There was a container of leftover pasta from 2 nights ago, a bottle of still water, half a lime on a small ceramic plate, already turning at the edges. These were ordinary things. The lime, the container, the particular domestic arrangement of a refrigerator in a home where someone had been living a daily life while he was gone. And the contrast between that and the folders on his desk was so stark that he felt it physically, somewhere behind his sternum. He closed the refrigerator, did not eat anything. He sat on the kitchen counter, something he never did, an old habit from before the penthouse, from the years when kitchens were small and counters were the only available surface, and stared at the dark window above the sink. The city was starting its pre-dawn shift, garbage trucks somewhere below. The particular change in the ambient light that preceded sunrise by about an hour, subtle enough that most people never noticed it. He called Ferraro at 4:30. It rang 4 times. Ferraro picked up on the 5th. "It's me," Lucian said. "I know." A pause. The sound of Ferraro moving, sheets, the creak of a frame. The man slept lightly by professional necessity. "What happened?" "I need to know if anyone's been asking questions in the last 6 months. Anyone outside the usual circle, anyone with an interest in the financial structure, and anyone, define anyone. Forensic accountant, private investigators, someone working a financial intelligence picture on the organization." Silence. "Ferraro, I heard a thing," Ferraro said. 2 months ago, maybe 3. Someone was pulling corporate filings in Delaware and the Caymans, registered agent contacts, standard public record searches, but the pattern was too systematic for a journalist. I had Ruiz look into it. He said it traced back to a consulting firm in White Plains that had no visible clients and had been incorporated 8 months ago. Lucien closed his eyes. "I told Ruiz it was probably a competitor doing routine intelligence work," Ferraro said. "I didn't escalate it. Should I have escalated it? It wasn't really a question." "Who owns the consulting firm?" Lucien said. Ruiz said it was a holding company. He didn't go deeper. "Go deeper. Now." "When do you think?" He hung up, stayed on the counter. Outside, a garbage truck made its particular hydraulic sound somewhere on the street below. That massive mechanical groan of compression, the kind of sound that was so much a part of the city's nighttime vocabulary that most people had stopped hearing it entirely. He was thinking about Marcus Vale, who had sat across from him at Christmas dinner 2 years ago and talked about college basketball for 40 minutes, who wore glasses with slightly too large frames and drove a 10-year-old Volvo and had the specific careful demeanor of a man who had grown up in the shadow of a more visibly powerful sibling. Serafina's light, her poise, her ability to command attention without effort, and had compensated by becoming extraordinarily good at the things that happened in the dark. The patient work, the numbers. Lucian had looked at Marcus Vale and seen a peripheral figure. He had not looked carefully enough. At 6 in the morning, he showered, changed, and made coffee. He was standing at the kitchen island when he heard Serafina's door open down the hall and the soft, deliberate sound of her moving through the morning. He watched the coffee and did not turn around. She came into the kitchen. She was dressed already. Not for a day at home, but properly dressed, dark slacks and a maternity blouse in deep burgundy. Her hair pulled back, small pearl earrings she wore when she considered herself in professional context. She went to the cabinet and took out a glass and filled it with water from the filter on the counter, and drank half of it standing at the sink, looking at nothing. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Not looking at him?" "No." She nodded, set the glass down, opened the refrigerator and looked at the same contents he had stared at 4 hours ago with the same apparent absence of appetite. "I have an appointment at 9, she said. "With your attorney." "Yes." "Cancel it," he said. She closed the refrigerator, turned and looked at him for the first time. Her expression was composed in the specific way of a person who had anticipated this request and had her response ready before she walked into the room. "No," she said. "Sarah, I'm asking you to give me a day. One day before you file anything. That's not— I've given you 14 months, she said. I don't have another day to give." He set the coffee down. "That's not fair," he said, and heard immediately how weak it sounded. Not just in this room, but in the general context of the conversation they were having. The information on his desk, the months of surveillance, the forensic accountant in White Plains, and he saw from her expression that she heard it too. "No," she agreed. "It's not. A lot of things haven't been fair." She moved toward the kitchen door. "Your attorneys will receive the courtesy copy by 10. I'd suggest you call whoever you're planning to use before that so they're not caught off guard. We should talk about this." She stopped in the doorway, kept her back to him. "We talked last night," she said. "That wasn't a conversation. That was a presentation." She turned around then, and for a moment, just a moment, the composure cracked. Not dramatically, not into anything that looked like weakness, but into something real. Something that had been under the surface of the controlled, document-presenting, clause-citing version of her that had sat behind his desk. "You want a conversation," she said. Her voice was still steady, but the temperature had changed. "Okay, let's have one. Milan, November. You told me you were in meetings all day Thursday, and you couldn't call because the time zone made it difficult and your phone battery was inconsistent." She stopped. "You were at a vineyard in Tuscany. I have the photographs. She's wearing a dress I recognize from your credit card statement. You bought it for her at a boutique on Via della Vigna Nuova. She's laughing. You have your hand on her waist. You look—" She stopped again. "You look like a different person. You look happy." The word happy sat in the room like something that had been thrown hard. "You looked like a man who was exactly where he wanted to be," she said. "And I was here. 7 months ago, I wasn't showing yet, and I was here waiting for a phone call and eating dinner alone and telling myself that the marriage was difficult, but that it was real, and that it was—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "That's the conversation. That's what there is to talk about. I don't need more of it." She left the kitchen. He stood with his coffee going cold and did not move for a long time. At 8:30, he was in the back of the town car heading downtown. Caruso drove. The morning traffic was dense and slow, which Lucien normally found intolerable and today barely registered. He was on his phone, the real one, the current personal line, talking to a man named Gerard Ashby, who was the best divorce and asset protection attorney in the tri-state area, known specifically in certain circles for his work with clients whose financial lives required extreme discretion. "I need you available today," Lucien said. "I have 3 appointments." "Cancel them." A pause. Ashby was not a man who canceled appointments for anyone. He was also not a man who turned down the particular kind of retainer that Lucien's situation would represent. "I can be free by noon," Ashby said. "My office. Not yours. I'll need to see the filing documents when they come through. They'll come through by 10. You'll have copies within the hour. And the scope? Asset protection, custody, or—" "Everything," Lucien said. "Comprehensive. I need to know exactly what she can use and what she can't." Another pause. Ashby, who had spent 30 years in this practice and had a specific antenna for cases that contained layers, was clearly recalibrating. "Is there a criminal exposure component?" he said carefully. Lucien watched the traffic through the window. A school bus, a delivery truck, a woman in a yellow coat walking a large dog with tremendous apparent dignity. "Read the documents first," Lucien said. "Then we'll talk about scope." He hung up. His second call was to his consigliere, a man named Enzo Falcetti, who had been his father's consigliere before him, and who was 71 years old and had the specific authority that comes from having survived things that should have killed you. Enzo picked up on the second ring, which meant he had been expecting the call. "You heard," Lucien said. "I heard something," Enzo said. "I didn't know what I was hearing until now." "What did you hear?" "That your wife's been spending time with people in White Plains, that someone pulled a lot of financial records. I put it aside because I didn't—" He stopped. "I should have brought it to you." "Yes," Lucien said. "You should have. Is it bad?" She has the Cayman structure, the Valdez arrangement, the Luxembourg transfers. Silence. Enzo. I'm thinking, the old man said. His voice had changed. The particular shift of a man who has managed crises for decades and is currently calculating the dimensions of a new one. How complete is the picture? Complete enough to constitute a significant problem if it reaches the wrong people. Does she intend? She intends to file today. The terms are in the documents. She's not interested in causing damage. She wants a clean exit, but the information is the leverage, and she's made it clear she knows how to use it. And if you fight the filing, Lucian didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew the answer. All right, Enzo said. All right, don't move on anything today. I'll reach out to the Santoro people quietly, let them know this is a personal matter and the organization is stable. Capos need to hear that from someone before the rumors start. The rumors will start by tonight. They'll start in an hour, Enzo said flatly. These things always do. The question is what shape we give them. He hung up with Enzo and sat with the phone in his lap as the car moved through the clogged mid-morning streets. By 11, he was in the glass-walled conference room on the 32nd floor of his primary office building. Ashby had arrived with 2 associates and a paralegal, all of whom had signed enhanced NDAs before entering the elevator. The filing documents were open on the table. Ashby had been in practice for 30 years. He had the particular composure of a man who absorbed bad news professionally. He took it in, sorted it, set the emotional content aside, and focused on the mechanical problem. He had been reading for 20 minutes in silence while Lucien sat at the head of the table and watched the city through the floor-to-ceiling glass. The asset documentation is extraordinary, Ashby said. He was not being complimentary. He was stating a technical reality in the tone of an engineer who has identified a structural problem. Whoever built this financial picture had significant sophistication. This isn't a fishing expedition. Someone mapped your entire holding structure and identified the instruments by function, not just by name. Her brother, Marcus Vale. You know him? By reputation. Forensic accounting, primarily insurance fraud and estate disputes. He doesn't do this kind of work publicly. Ashby looked up. He would have had to want to do this specifically, for her. Lucy Tien said nothing. The Valdez notation concerns me most, Ashby continued. The language used to describe it suggests they understand what it actually represents. If this document were produced in a formal proceeding, it won't reach a formal proceeding. Ashby looked at him. His associates were very carefully studying the table. What are you considering? Ashby said. I want the counterfiling ready by end of day, and I want to know every legal mechanism available to challenge the validity of the evidence she's compiled. On what grounds? Privacy. Unauthorized access to financial records. Whatever exists. Ashby was quiet for a moment. The challenge there is that a significant portion of what she has is public record, registered agents, filing documents, corporate registrations. The chain of inference from public documents to private structures is legally complicated, and pursuing that challenge draws attention to the structures themselves. Then find another angle. Lucian. Ashby used his first name, which he did only when he was about to say something his client didn't want to hear. If she files today, and you contest aggressively, the court proceedings become a venue where this documentation enters the record. That's a problem significantly larger than the divorce itself. The smarter play— I'm not looking for the smarter play, Lucian said. I'm looking for a way to— To do what? Ashby said. To win. What does winning look like here? Lucien turned away from the window. He looked at the documents on the table, at the precise, meticulous reconstruction of his financial life, at the photographs his wife had included, not of the affair, those were in the manila folders at home, but of his signature on documents, of corporate registrations, of the careful paper trail that led from his legitimate business empire into the architecture underneath it. I need tonight, he said. I need to talk to her before you file the counter. She may not— Tonight. One conversation. Tell your office to hold until I call you. Ashby looked at him for a moment, set his pen down. One night, he said. I'll need to hear from you by 9 tomorrow morning. Lucien was back in his car by 2. He told Caruso to drive. Not to a destination, just to drive. They went uptown, through the park, down the west side, the long, slow circuit of a city that Lucien had moved through thousands of times, and that felt, this afternoon, entirely different in a way he couldn't precisely name. His phone rang at 2:45. He looked at the screen. Vivian. He stared at her name for 3 full rings. He answered. "I heard," she said. Her voice was different from what he remembered. The warm, easy quality that had defined every previous conversation they'd had was tighter now, careful. "Someone called me this morning. I don't know who. They told me there were divorce proceedings and that my name was in the documents." "It's handled," he said. "Lucien, it's handled, Vivian. You don't need to—" "I need to know if I'm exposed," she said. The warmth was entirely gone now. Just the question, clean and direct and entirely self-interested. "My name in legal filings, my family has a foundation, there are board positions, Your name appears as a fact," he said, "not as a party. You're not at legal risk." "You can guarantee that." He said nothing. "Lucien, can you guarantee that?" "No," he said. "I can't guarantee anything right now. That's not—" She hung up. He held the phone and looked at the park going by outside the window. The specific bare-branch November landscape of Central Park in late morning. Joggers, a woman with a stroller, a man throwing a ball for a dog, the mundane, ongoing world that continued to exist regardless. He had spent 8 months believing that Vivian was something real, something that existed for its own reasons, that had its own weight and texture, independent of the circumstances that had produced it. He had told himself this very carefully. She had hung up on him in under 90 seconds, the moment her interest became inconvenient. He put the phone face down on the seat. At 4 in the afternoon, Enzo called back. "Benedetti wants to talk," Enzo said. Benedetti was the head of the oldest family in the network, older than Lucien's father's operation, old enough to have opinions about stability and its importance. He's heard something and he's not comfortable. Tell him the organization is stable. He wants to hear it from you. Tonight. He won't wait until tonight. Lucien checked his watch. 6 o'clock, the place on Mulberry. I'll tell him. He arrived at the apartment at 5:30. The penthouse was quiet. Mrs. Huang had been fresh orchids on the console, the smell of cleaning product, everything in its correct place. The folders were still on his desk where he'd left them. He had locked the study door before he left, and the lock was still intact. He stood in the hallway outside the master bedroom, could hear faintly music from inside. Something classical, something slow. Serafina played classical music when she was trying to manage stress. She had done it since before they were married. He had always found it a minor irritant. He was finding it at this moment almost unbearable in its familiarity. He knocked. The music stopped. "Come in," she said. She was on the chaise in the corner, a book open and face down on her lap, her shoes off. She looked at him with the patient expression of someone who had been expecting this and had decided in advance what shape it would take. "Ashby's holding the counterfiling," he said. "I want one conversation." "We had a conversation this morning. A real one. Sit across from me, both sides of it, no documents." She looked at him for a moment, then she picked up the book from her lap and set it on the side table and gestured to the chair across the room. He sat. "The Valdez arrangement," he said. "If that reaches the wrong ears, I know what it is, Lucien. Then you know that protecting it isn't just about me. There are people." "Don't," she said. "Don't use other people as the reason I should protect your interests. That's not a real argument, and you know it." He stopped. "I'm not trying to destroy the organization," she said. "I've never wanted that. The terms in the filing are designed to give you an exit from this marriage with the structure intact. That's intentional. I had Marcus design it that way specifically." "Then why include the Valdez documentation at all?" "Because you need to understand that I have it," she said. "Not to use it, to make sure you understand that the option exists if I need it." "That's the same thing." "It's not. Having a weapon and using it are different things. I would have thought you understood that better than anyone." He looked at her across the room. The evening light was coming through the bedroom windows. The particular amber late daylight of autumn falling across the chaise, across her, across the visible curve of her pregnancy that was their daughter, who would arrive in approximately 9 weeks, and who would come into a world that was currently being renegotiated in real time. "I don't want to lose her," he said. Serafina's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, but he had spent 6 years learning to read the small movements of her face. Valentina, he said. Whatever happens between us, I don't want to lose her. The silence stretched. The custody terms in the filing are fair, she said. Her voice was slightly different now. Not softer exactly, but less armored. More than fair. I didn't write them to punish you. She deserves to know her father. I won't be in her life through a visitation schedule. That's what this is, she said. That's what you chose, not me. You. He had no answer for that. It was accurate. It was the most accurate thing anyone had said to him in 2 days, which was saying something, given the last 2 days. I want to ask you something, he said, and I need you to answer honestly. She waited. If I hadn't come home when I did, if you'd had another week, another month, would you have... Was there ever a version of this where you didn't go through with it? The question sat in the room. She took a long breath. 6 months ago, she said. Maybe. I'd found the accounts, but not the full picture. I was still... She stopped. I was still deciding what I was deciding. And now I know everything, she said. And knowing everything is... She stopped again, longer this time. It changes things. Not just about you, about me. About who I've been in this marriage, and who I let myself become, and what I'm willing to do for my daughter that I wasn't willing to do for myself. She looked at him directly. There's no version now, I'm sorry. He stood. He walked to the bedroom door. Lucien. He stopped. The counterfiling, she said. If you go through with it, if Ashby files and this goes into formal proceedings, I need you to understand what I'll have to do. I don't want to do it, but I will. He turned around. Her eyes were steady, not threatening, not angry, something far more final than either. I know, he said. He left the bedroom. In the hallway, he stood for a moment with his back against the wall, looking at the ceiling, the same ceiling he had looked at 10,000 times and never noticed, the particular texture of it, the recessed lighting he had chosen from a catalog 6 years ago when this apartment was new and the future was something he had felt entirely in control of. His phone buzzed. Enzo. Time for Mulberry Street. He pushed off the wall, walked to the elevator. The doors closed. He was in the lobby when the second buzz came. Not Enzo this time. A number he didn't recognize. New York area code, different from the New Jersey number of the previous night. A single image file. He opened it. A photograph. Taken, from the angle and focal length, from a vehicle. Today's date stamped in the corner. The subject of the photograph was a man Lucien recognized immediately. Not a face from his world, not from his organization, not from his marriage. It was Ashby. Gerard Ashby, his attorney of 12 hours, walking into a building on Center Street. The building that housed, among other offices, the organized crime unit of the United States Attorney's Office. Lucien stood in his building lobby and looked at the photograph and felt the floor beneath him, the marble, the solid engineered foundation of a building worth $90 million. Turn entirely, irrevocably. The photograph did not blur. He kept looking at it as though repetition might change what it showed, but the image was clear. High resolution, taken by someone who knew exactly what focal length to use from exactly the right distance. Ashby's gray overcoat, the particular way the man held his briefcase, left hand slightly elevated, a habit Lucien had noticed across a dozen meetings and filed away as meaningless. The building's address visible above the entrance in the background, Center Street. Lucien had spent 23 years understanding what buildings meant. Not their architecture, not their aesthetics, their function. Who went in, who came out, and what that movement signified. This building meant one specific thing for a man in Ashby's profession, carrying a briefcase that contained, as of 3 hours ago, a full copy of every document Serafina's team had compiled. He stood in the lobby of his own building for 11 seconds. Then he called Enzo. Cancel Mulberry Street, he said, the moment the line connected. Benedetti is already... Cancel it. Tell him tomorrow. Tell him anything. He was already moving toward the exit. I need you at the office in 30 minutes. Come alone. What happened? Ashby. A pause. One beat. Enzo had been in this life long enough that a single name delivered in that particular tone required no elaboration. 30 minutes, Enzo said. The town car was at the curb. Caruso read his face through the windshield and had the door open before Lucian reached the vehicle. He got in, sat, said nothing for a moment. "The office," he finally said. Caruso pulled out without a word. Lucian opened the photograph again, studied the timestamp. 4:47 p.m. He had been sitting in his bedroom talking to Serafina at 4:47 p.m. Ashby had left the copy of the documents, signed his NDA, shaken hands, and walked out of the building at noon, and by 4:47 he was at Center Street. 4 hours and 47 minutes. That was how long his attorney of 12 hours had waited before walking the documentation into federal hands. The question was not whether Ashby had done it. The question, the one that was pressing against the inside of Lucian's skull with a physical weight, was why. Ashby was expensive, discreet, professionally bound by privilege, and sufficiently self-interested to understand that burning a client of Lucian's caliber carried consequences that no federal cooperation arrangement could adequately compensate. Unless the arrangement wasn't new, unless Ashby had been placed. The car stopped at a light. Lucien stared at the photograph, at the briefcase, at the angle of the shot, taken from a vehicle, street level, the photographer positioned on the same block, stationary, which meant they had known Ashby's destination in advance and were there to document arrival, not to follow. Someone had told the photographer where Ashby was going. Someone who knew Lucian had hired Ashby this morning. The light changed. The car moved. There were 3 people who had known about Ashby before 4 p.m. Lucian himself, Enzo, whom he had referenced obliquely in their morning call, and whoever had been listening to his phone. He opened a new text to a number saved under the name of a plumbing supply company and typed 4 words, "Sweep the car now." The response came in 40 seconds. A single character, a checkmark. He put the phone away and looked out the window and breathed very carefully. Enzo was already in the office when Lucien arrived. He was sitting in one of the chairs across from the main desk. Not behind it, never behind it. That had always been a point of protocol between them, with his coat still on and his hands folded in his lap. He was 71 and looked it tonight in a way he didn't always. The particular age that comes out under specific kinds of pressure. Lucien placed his phone on the desk with the photograph open and turned it to face Enzo. The old man looked at it. His expression did not change. His hands did not move. "When did this come to you?" Enzo said. "Lobby, 40 minutes ago. You know the number. Burner, New York prefix, gone by now." Enzo nodded slowly. He kept his eyes on the photograph. Ashby has been involved in a quiet federal matter for approximately 14 months. A shipping operation out of Baltimore, not yours, a separate family. He provided documentation under a sealed cooperation agreement. I heard about it through a contact at the Civil Division 3 months ago. He paused. "I didn't connect it to your situation because at the time you didn't have a situation." The room was very quiet. "You knew Ashby was cooperating," Lucien said. Lucien said, "With a federal investigation. With a different federal investigation. And you didn't tell me." "I didn't consider it relevant." Enzo's voice was steady. He was not flinching. He was doing what he had always done, meeting consequences directly and absorbing them without performance. "That was an error in my judgment. I understand that." Lucien looked at the old man across the desk and felt something that he had felt only a handful of times in 23 years. The particular vertigo of discovering that someone in his innermost circle had made a decision without him. Not betrayal, not yet. Error. But error at this level, in this moment, with this timing, functioned as something close to the same thing. "Who recommended Ashby to me this morning?" Lucien said. He watched Enzo's face. Something moved there. Barely. The flicker of a man arriving at an uncomfortable calculation. "You called me at 6 this morning," Enzo said. "You told me you needed a clean attorney, someone outside your normal structure. I gave you 3 names and you chose Ashby because his reputation for discretion was the strongest." "Who gave you those 3 names?" The old man's jaw moved, not speaking, thinking. "Enzo. I have a contact at Hargrove Chambers. She provides referrals occasionally. Ashby was on her recommended list." "And your contact at Hargrove Chambers, what do you know about her?" The silence this time was different, longer. The silence of a man who is conducting a rapid internal audit and arriving at results he does not want to present. Her name is Diana Rice, Enzo said. She's been a contact for 4 years. Corporate referrals, nothing sensitive. Does Marcus Vale have any connection to Hargrove Chambers? A long pause. I don't know, Enzo said. Find out, Lucian said. Tonight. He drove home. He drove. Not to the office, not to Mulberry Street, not to any of the locations where the next logical moves in this situation would normally be made. He drove home because his wife was there, and because the photograph on his phone had rearranged the architecture of what he understood, and because he needed to look at Serafina and determine whether what had happened tonight was something she knew about or something she didn't. It mattered enormously which one it was. He let himself in at 7:40. The penthouse was quiet. The classical music was gone. He moved through the foyer, past the Basquiat, down the hall, and knocked once on the bedroom door. No answer. He opened it. She wasn't there. The chaise was empty. The book was still on the side table where she'd placed it. Her shoes were gone. He checked the kitchen, the living room, the formal dining room, each room empty in the specific way of spaces where a person has recently been present and has just left. He found her on the terrace. She was standing at the railing with her coat on, a heavy camel overcoat over the burgundy blouse, her hands wrapped around a mug of something warm. She was looking at the city. The wind at this height had teeth, and it moved her hair despite the clip, loose strands across her face that she didn't push away. She heard the door and turned. He stepped out onto the terrace. The wind hit him immediately. Cold, sharp, the particular November wind off the water that the building's height turned into something with genuine force. You were at Mulberry Street, she said, reading his face, his clothes, something. I canceled it. He stopped 6 feet from her. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. I've been telling you the truth for 2 days, she said. Gerard Ashby. Her expression didn't change, which was its own kind of answer. Because if the name had meant nothing to her, there would have been a question, a slight shift of confusion. There was none. You know that name, he said. She looked at him. The wind moved her hair again. She didn't touch it. Marcus spoke to someone at Hargrove Chambers, she said, 4 months ago. A referral contact there who had some connection to a federal matter Marcus became aware of through his accounting work. It was... She stopped. It was information. Marcus thought it was useful to know who in your legal circle might be accessible to pressure from outside. The mug was warm in her hands, and she was holding it too tightly. He could see the tension in her knuckles, the whiteness at the joints. You built a referral trap, he said. Your brother built a referral trap and placed it where my consigliere would find it and recommend it to me in an emergency. That's not... Sarah. His voice was flat, not angry yet. Flat in the way that precedes anger. The specific register of a man who is processing something in real time and hasn't yet determined the shape it should take. Tell me what that is, if it isn't what I said. She set the mug down on the railing, turned to face him fully. It was a contingency, she said. If you filed a counter and went aggressive with legal proceedings, Marcus wanted there to be a mechanism that would create enough instability that you'd reconsider. She met his eyes directly. It wasn't supposed to activate today. I didn't know you'd call Ashby today. I didn't know any of this would move this fast. But it activated today. Because you called Ashby. Because Ashby is a federal informant who now has every document your team compiled and walked it directly to the organized crime unit at the U.S. Attorney's Office. He stopped. Let the full weight of that settle in the cold air between them. Do you understand what you've done? She had gone very still. He walked it in, she said. Not a question. Her voice had changed. The composure that had carried her through 2 days of confrontation had developed a fracture line, thin but audible. 4:47 p.m., Lucian said. I have the photograph. She turned away from him, looked at the city. He watched her from behind, the rigid set of her shoulders, the way her hands had dropped from the railing and were now pressed flat against the sides of her coat. That wasn't supposed to happen, she said. I know. Marcus said that the federal connection would be a deterrent, that if you knew about it, you'd back down. He wasn't supposed to... Your brother gave federal prosecutors a complete forensic picture of my financial structure, Lucian said. Documented, organized, sourced. everything they would need to open a formal investigation, and you put that picture together. She turned back around. Her face was different now. The controlled, document-presenting chess player's composure that had defined every moment of this confrontation was still there underneath, but the surface had changed. She looked, for the first time, like a person who had calculated very carefully and had one variable go wrong and was now doing the arithmetic on what that meant. "I didn't want this," she said. "What did you want?" "I wanted to leave," she said, and her voice was raw in a way that had nothing performed about it. "That's all. That's what all of it was. I wanted to be able to leave safely, and I needed leverage to do it safely, and She stopped. "I didn't want to destroy anything. I wanted enough to be able to walk away without you finding a reason to make it dangerous." He looked at her. He had been preparing for the last hour for anger, for the specific cold rage that he deployed in professional crises, the emotional state that narrowed his focus and clarified his options and had served him consistently for 2 decades. He had been preparing to be furious. What he found instead was something that had no name he could reach for quickly. Not forgiveness, not absolution. Something more like the exhausted recognition of 2 people who had made different catastrophic errors and arrived at the same catastrophic result. "You need to call Marcus," he said. "Now, tonight. He needs to understand what he set in motion." "What does it change?" she said. "If they have the documents." "It changes the timeline," he said. "It changes what moves are available and how much time I have to make them." Marcus understood the financial structure well enough to map it. "I need to know exactly what he gave Rice, and what Rice gave Ashby, and exactly what Ashby walked through that door." She picked up her phone from her coat pocket. She called Marcus. He answered on the first ring, which meant he had been waiting. "She's here," Serafina said. "Lucienne's here. Tell him what you gave Diana Rice." A pause. Long enough that Lucien took 2 steps forward and held out his hand. She looked at him. Then she put the phone in his hand. "Marcus," Lucien said, "I'm aware of what happened." The voice was quiet, careful. The voice of a man who had been waiting for this call and had prepared for it. "I need you to understand that the documentation I provided to Diana Rice was structured to function as a deterrent. It was not intended to be forwarded to federal prosecutors. But it was. I underestimated Rice's incentives in the current environment." A pause. "I'm sorry. That's an inadequate thing to say, but it's accurate. What exactly did you give her?" "The complete Cayman structure, the Luxembourg transfer documentation, the Valdez arrangement, the full picture, not the summary, the corporate chain from your legitimate operations to the offshore holdings." He paused. "Everything." Lucien closed his eyes. Just for a moment. 1 second. "Did you keep copies outside the set you gave Rice?" "Yes." "Where?" "Secure. Not accessible to her or to anyone connected to her." "I need those copies," Lucien said. "Not to destroy them, to understand the full scope of what's now in federal hands." He opened his eyes. "And I need to know, in the Valdez documentation, did you include the Esperanza transaction?" Silence. "Marcus?" "I included it because I couldn't map the structure without it," Marcus said. "It was necessary for the financial picture to be coherent." Lucien looked at the city, at the 10,000 lit windows of the thing he had spent his life building and protecting, at the indifferent geometry of it, the blocks and towers and bridges, the infrastructure of a world that would continue existing regardless of what happened to any specific person operating within it. The Esperanza transaction was not simply a financial instrument. It was the load-bearing element of an arrangement that involved 2 other families, a significant political relationship, and a man in federal law enforcement whose cooperation had been purchased 6 years ago and whose exposure would constitute a catastrophe that extended far beyond Lucien's personal situation. That man's name was Deputy Director Alan Croft, and if Croft's name was in any document that had reached the Organized Crime Unit at the U.S. Attorney's Office, Croft would know about it within 24 hours. And Croft, facing exposure, was a man who would do whatever was necessary. "Call me back on the encrypted line," Lucien said to Marcus. 20 minutes. He handed the phone back to Serafina. She was looking at him. The fracture in her composure had widened. Not into tears, not into visible distress, but into the particular expression of someone who has understood, for the first time, the full scale of the terrain they are standing in. "Who is Esperanza?" she said. "You don't want to know that." Lucien. Serafina. He said her name with a weight he hadn't used before. Not commanding, not cold, something closer to the voice of a person trying to communicate urgency to someone they are genuinely afraid for. "You and Valentina need to leave this apartment tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight." Her hand went to her stomach, the automatic involuntary gesture of a pregnant woman when something frightens her. "Where?" "Your parents' house in Connecticut. Leave in the next 2 hours. Tell no one where you're going except your mother." He stopped. "Take only what you need. Don't use the car service I normally send you. Call a car yourself from your personal account." "You're scaring me." "Good," he said. "You should be scared. Not of me." He picked up his phone. "Of what happens when the wrong people find out that the documentation your brother compiled has reached federal hands." She stared at him. "Go," he said. She went inside. He stood on the terrace alone in the cold wind and made 3 calls in rapid succession. The first to Enzo. Confirm the Croft connection and assess exposure. The second to a man named Trevino in Washington, whose function in Lucian's network had never been written down anywhere. Find out what, if anything, had been flagged in the last 6 hours at the relevant office. The third to a number he had not dialed in 3 years. A number that existed for situations he had hoped would never materialize. The third call rang once and went to voicemail. He left no message. He went inside, moved through the penthouse to the master bedroom. Serafina was at the closet, moving with the careful urgency of a 7 months pregnant woman who has been told to hurry, pulling a bag from the shelf. She was breathing through her nose in the specific concentrated way of someone managing panic with deliberate technique. He stood in the doorway. "When you get to your parents," he said, "don't call me on this number. Use the phone in the guest room drawer," she said. The old Nokia. "I know. I've known it was there for 2 years." He absorbed that. "There's a number taped to the battery," he said. "Call that number when you arrive. Say you're calling for Thomas. They'll know what to do." She stopped, turned around with the bag half packed against her hip, looked at him across the bedroom, across the bed they had shared for 6 years, across the ordinary domestic landscape of a room that had contained a marriage, which had contained inside it the slow accumulation of distance and silence and things that had never been said until everything came apart at once. "Are you going to be all right?" she said. The question landed in a way he hadn't expected. Not tactical, not strategic, just the question itself, in her voice, with the weight of everything they had been to each other before it went wrong. "I don't know yet," he said. She held his eyes for a moment. Then she turned back to the bag. He went to the study, locked the door, sat at the desk and waited for Trevino to call back. And while he waited, he opened the bottom drawer, the one below the locked one, the ordinary drawer with pens and a spare phone charger and a folded receipt from a restaurant he couldn't remember visiting, and took out the thing that had been there for 5 years. A single index card, handwritten, 12 names, the 12 people who, if everything else failed, constituted the last available architecture of his survival. He set it on the desk in front of him. His phone rang. Trevino. He picked up. "Talk to me," he said. "There's a flag," Trevino said. His voice was tight in a way that communicated everything before the words did. "As of 90 minutes ago. It went up fast, faster than a standard intake. Someone on the inside moved it up the chain immediately, which means someone on the inside was waiting for it." Lucian stared at the index card. "Croft," he said. "I don't have confirmation of that, but the flag has his division's fingerprints on it." A pause. "Lucien, if Croft is running this from the inside, you have maybe 48 hours before—" "I know what I have," Lucien said. He hung up. He looked at the index card for a long time, at the 12 names, at the particular handwriting, his own, from 5 years ago, from a night not entirely unlike this one, when he had sat in this chair and understood for the first time that an empire could be dismantled from within as efficiently as from without, and had written down the names of the people who could prevent that, and had locked the knowledge away and hoped he would never need it. From down the hall, he heard Serafina close a suitcase, heard her moving toward the front door. heard the elevator open and close. Then the apartment was silent. He sat alone in the study with 12 names and 48 hours, and the particular absolute clarity of a man who has reached the place where every comfortable option has been removed, and what remains is not a choice between good and bad, but between bad and worse. He picked up the index card. 12 names. He had written them in order of trust, which was also, he understood now, an order of risk. Because the people you trusted most were the people whose betrayal could destroy you most completely. He had learned that lesson the hard way twice before. He was apparently still learning it. He started at the bottom of the list. The first 3 calls went unanswered. It was after 9 on a Tuesday night, and the people on this list were not people who answered unknown numbers, and the number he was calling from was unknown by design, a line purchased 3 years ago for a situation he had hoped was hypothetical. The 4th name answered on the 2nd ring. "It's me," Lucian said. A pause, the sound of a door closing somewhere, footsteps, the specific acoustic shift of a man moving from a public space to a private one. "I heard something today," the man said. His name was Garrison, and he worked in a capacity that Lucian would not describe over any phone line. "I wasn't sure if it was real." "It's real." "How much time?" "Trevino says 48 hours before formal movement. I think it's less. I think Croft is running it from inside, and Croft doesn't wait." "Croft," Garrison said. "Just the name, the way you say a word that tastes bad." "He's in the documentation. Full exposure." Silence. "Then you're not looking at 48 hours, Garrison said. "You're looking at tonight." The word tonight hit the study like a change in air pressure. Lucien felt it in his ears, in the specific physical way that certain information registers before the mind has finished processing it. "Tonight," he said. "If I were Croft and my name was in a document that had reached that office, I would not wait until morning to manage the situation." Garrison paused. "You need to move. Not tomorrow. Not in an hour. Now. I have 12 names on a card. I've called 4. Stop calling from that number. Assume it's already flagged. Use the protocol." "Which protocol?" "The one your father built," Garrison said. "The one you never updated because you thought you'd never need it." He hung up. Lucien sat for exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds of stillness. Not paralysis. Not indecision, but the specific compression of a man reducing 23 years of accumulated contingency planning into a single operational sequence. Then he moved. He opened the wall panel behind the Basquiat, the real reason the painting hung where it hung, a detail known to 3 people alive, and removed the case that lived there. Matte black, combination lock, the combination a number he had never written down anywhere. Inside, 2 phones still in factory packaging, 40,000 in cash and mixed bills, a passport under a name that was not his, and a small encrypted drive that contained the protocol Garrison had referenced. He took all of it. He was at the elevator when his current phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. "Enzo." He answered. "Don't go to the office," Enzo said immediately. "There are 2 vehicles on the block. One has been there since 7. The other arrived 20 minutes ago." "Surveillance. Or advanced positioning. I can't tell which from here." "Where are you?" 3 blocks south. I'm on foot." A pause. "There's something else. Benedetti called me 40 minutes ago. He knows about Croft. He doesn't know how he knows. Someone fed it to him, someone who wanted him to know tonight, specifically." Lucian stood at the elevator with the case in his hand. "Someone is managing the information," he said. "Someone is moving all the pieces at once," Enzo said. "This isn't just the federal angle. This has been orchestrated. The timing, Ashby, the flag at the office, Benedetti getting the Croft information tonight, this is coordinated." "By who?" Silence. "Enzo." "I don't know," the old man said. "And that's the thing that frightens me. I should know. After 50 years, I should be able to feel who is pulling which string, and I can't feel it. I can't see the center of it. Meet me at the Delancey garage, level 3. 30 minutes. He took the stairs. 43 floors. He had not taken the stairs since the building's opening event 7 years ago, when he had walked up 2 flights for a conversation that required no witnesses and no elevator camera. His legs registered the first 10 floors as manageable, the next 10 as work, And by the 20th floor, his thighs were burning with a specific deep muscle fatigue that had nothing to do with fitness and everything to do with the weight of what he was carrying. The case, the phone, the 40,000, and the accumulated pressure of 2 days without sleep and the specific physical tax of sustained adrenaline. He pushed through the lobby exit onto a side street, not the main entrance, and walked east without the car. Without Caruso. Without the infrastructure of a life organized around the assumption that he would always have resources available. The November air was a shock after the building's controlled climate, raw, with moisture in it, the smell of the river a few blocks east cutting through the exhaust, and the restaurant smells of the blocks he moved through. He walked fast, kept to the middle of the sidewalk, watched reflections in windows without turning his head. A technique so old it had become unconscious, the way professional paranoia eventually stops feeling like paranoia and starts feeling like ordinary perception. No visible tail, which meant nothing except that if there was a tail, it was competent. He was 6 blocks from the garage when the phone in his pocket buzzed. Not the current personal phone, the prepaid from the case, the one he had just taken out of factory packaging 12 minutes ago. A phone whose number existed nowhere. He stopped walking, looked at the screen. A call. No number displayed, just the word unknown in white letters on black. He stood on the sidewalk with people moving around him, a couple arguing quietly, a man walking a dog, 2 kids on electric scooters weaving between pedestrians, and answered. Walk north on Essex, a voice said. Male. Neutral. The specific flatness of a voice being deliberately drained of identifying characteristics. Don't run. Don't signal anyone. There's a car at the corner of Essex and Delancey. Gray Suburban. Get in. Who is this? Someone who knew your father, the voice said. Someone who has been watching what happened today and would prefer you survive it. A pause. You have about 90 seconds before the 2 men who have been following you since you left the building realize you aren't going where they expected. Walk now. The line went dead. Lucien stood still for 1 more second. His heart rate had elevated, so he could feel it in his throat, the specific elevated rhythm of a cardiovascular system responding to genuine threat, not the managed tension of a negotiation, the older animal thing. He walked north on Essex. The gray Suburban was at the corner, engine running, the front passenger window down. The driver was a woman he didn't recognize, late 40s, short gray hair, the kind of face that was designed to be unmemorable. She looked at him once, just a glance, and nodded at the back door. He got in. The Suburban moved before he had fully closed the door. In the back seat across from him sat a man he had not seen in 7 years. His name was Bernard Kael. He was 63 years old and had worked for Lucien's father before the elder Moretti's death, in a capacity that had never been given a job title because the work it involved could not be described without implication. He had retired, or what passed for retirement in this world, and Lucien had assumed him to be in Florida or dead, both outcomes that had suited the particular arrangement of the organization's recent structure. He was neither. Croft moved 2 hours ago, Kael said. No greeting, no preamble. Just the operational information, delivered in the tone of a man briefing a colleague. He has a team assembled, not federal, private. People he uses for situations where federal procedure is a problem. They're not coming to arrest you, Lucien. You understand what I'm saying. Who's running them? Man named Driscoll, ex-bureau, been on Croft's private payroll for 4 years. 3 other men, all competent. Kael's eyes were steady, the specific alertness of someone who had been in this kind of situation enough times that the elevated stakes had stopped elevating his affect. Driscoll knows your regular movements. He knows about Caruso. He knows about the office and the Mulberry Street location. How? Because Croft has had a line on your organization for 2 years. Not through federal channels, a private intelligence operation he's been running on the side. Kael paused. He was waiting for a moment when he had enough leverage to approach you for a renegotiation of the Esperanza arrangement. The documentation your wife's brother compiled changed the equation. Now he's not interested in renegotiation. He's interested in elimination. He's interested in ensuring that no one survives who can connect his name to the Esperanza documentation. Kael looked at him. That includes your wife, her brother. Anyone who touched those documents. The Suburban was moving downtown, taking turns in a pattern that made no navigational sense, a counter-surveillance route, changing direction without apparent logic. My wife is in Connecticut, Lucian said. I know where she is, Kyle said. I have someone on the road to her parents' house. They'll arrive before Driscoll's people if we move in the next 20 minutes. Lucian looked at him. Why are you doing this? He said. Kale was quiet for a moment. The Suburban turned again, heading toward the bridge approach. Your father pulled me out of a situation in 1987 that I had no right to survive, he said. I've been waiting 36 years to balance that. He paused. I didn't think it would take this long. Lucian pulled out the prepaid. Give me the number for your man on the road to Connecticut. Kale gave it. Lucian called. It rang twice. This is Thomas, Lucian said. The name he'd given Serafina, the name taped to the Nokia battery. We're 18 minutes out, the man on the phone said. His voice was young, competent, focused. The subject left the address at 9:15 and is currently stationary at a rest stop on 95 North. She made a stop. We're watching from a distance. Stay on her, Lucian said. Don't approach unless there's a direct threat. She doesn't know you're there, and that's how it stays unless something moves. Understood. He hung up. Kale was watching him. You told her to go to Connecticut. I told her to go to her parents. And she went. Yes. Kale nodded slowly. She trusted you enough, after everything. Lucien didn't answer that, looked out the window. They were on the bridge now, the river black below, the city receding behind them, the specific suspension of transit in a vehicle between locations not yet arrived that made a certain kind of thinking possible. What's the play? He said. Croft needs to be removed from the board before morning, Kyle said. Not physically. That's not what I'm offering. But there are mechanisms. The arrangement Croft has been running is not unknown to everyone. There are people in legitimate authority who have been looking for a reason and a method. The Esperanza documentation, properly introduced through the correct channel, does not destroy you. It destroys Croft. He paused. But only if we control how it's introduced. Right now, that documentation is sitting in the wrong hands. We need it in the right ones before Driscoll's team completes its sweep. Driscoll is already moving. He's been moving for 2 hours. He started with your office. Kale's jaw tightened. Your consigliere. Lucien went cold. Enzo. He was at the Delancey garage waiting for you. Driscoll's people got there first. Kale held his gaze. He's alive. He's been detained. Not by federal people, by Driscoll's. They're holding him as leverage. They want you to surface. The cold had spread from Lucien's chest into his arms, into his hands. The case was on the seat beside him, and he was gripping its handle without realizing it, the metal edge of the latch pressing into his palm hard enough to mark the skin. Enzo, 71 years old. His father's man before he was Lucien. The person who had been in this life longer than anyone still breathing, who had made one error in judgment and had told him so directly without flinching, who had walked to a garage on a cold night because Lucien had asked. Where? Lucien said. Warehouse off the Greenpoint waterfront. Driscoll is using it as a staging point. Kale shook his head. You cannot go there. That's exactly where they want you. Enzo is 71 years old and has a heart condition. I know. He will not last a sustained interrogation. I know that too. Lucien looked at him. You said your man can reach Serafina before Driscoll's people. If we move in the next... Kale checked his watch. 14 minutes. Yes. And Enzo. I have 2 men available who can move on the Greenpoint location, but they need 30 minutes to position, and I don't have 30 minutes of certainty on Driscoll's timetable. What do you have certainty on? 20 minutes? Kyle said. Maybe 22. Lucien did the arithmetic. 20 minutes to position 2 men on a warehouse where Driscoll had at minimum 4. 14 minutes to get ahead of whatever was moving toward Connecticut and Serafina. Both problems operating simultaneously on separate clocks, neither one having the margin to wait for the other. The documents, he said. Marcus's copies. The ones outside the set that reached the federal office. Where are they? I don't know where Vale kept them. I do, Lucien said. He picked up the prepaid and called Marcus. It rang 6 times. 7. He was counting, jaw tight, watching the dark water below the bridge through the Suburban's window. 8. Marcus answered. "Where are the copies?" Lucien said. "Lucien." "Marcus, listen to me carefully. Croft has people moving tonight. Your sister is on the road to Connecticut. I have someone on her, but I need the copies of the documentation to move through a channel that neutralizes Croft before morning. Where are the copies?" A long pause. "White Plains," Marcus said. His voice had the strained quality of a man who is very frightened and managing it with the same methodical temperament that he applied to forensic accounting. "The consulting firm office. There's a floor safe behind the—" "Send me the combination," Lucien said. "Text it to this number in the next 60 seconds. "How do I know?" "You don't," Lucien said. "You've been making decisions about my life for 14 months based on incomplete information and imperfect execution. Marcus and I have been on the receiving end of every consequence. Right now I need you to make one decision based on the information I'm giving you directly. Your sister is on a highway in Connecticut, and the man who wants to use those documents to eliminate every witness to his exposure has people in motion tonight. Text me the combination." Silence. Then, "All right." He hung up. Kyle was watching him with an expression that might, in a different face, have been something close to respect. "White Plains," Lucien said. "Your people can get to the consulting firm?" "One of them can." Kyle pulled his own phone. "I'll redirect. The other one goes to Greenpoint. With one man, 20 minutes. The goal is not engagement. The goal is Enzo out of that building and away from Driscoll before the documents move." He held Kyle's eyes. "Can your man do that?" Kale looked at him for a moment. The Suburban was off the bridge now, moving through Brooklyn streets, the driver still executing the counter-surveillance pattern without apparent effort. "He can try," Kale said. "That's not—" "It's what I have," Kale said. His voice was flat and honest. "You want a guarantee? I can't give you one. I can give you a competent man and a 20-minute window and a probability. That's the situation." The phone buzzed. A text from Marcus's number. A 6-digit combination. Lucien forwarded it to Kale. Kale made 2 calls in rapid succession, both brief, both in a clipped shorthand that suggested long practice coordination. When he finished, he put the phone away and looked at Lucien with the steady gaze of a man who is committed to a course of action and has stopped running contingencies. 12 minutes, Kyle said. "After that, we'll know if it worked." The Suburban pulled into a parking structure in Brooklyn and stopped on the 2nd level. The driver cut the engine. The 3 of them sat in the sudden quiet, the structure's concrete columns throwing sharp shadows in the fluorescent light, the distant sound of highway traffic somewhere above. Lucien's phone, the current personal one, the one he'd been carrying for 2 years, buzzed in his pocket. He had forgotten he still had it. He looked at the screen. Serafina. He answered immediately. "There's a car," she said. Her voice was controlled, but the control was effortful. He could hear the work of it, the deliberate regulation of her breathing. "It's been behind me since I left the rest stop. Dark blue, no plates I can read. It pulled back when I slowed down and moved up when I accelerated." "I know," he said. "Where are you?" "Exit 48 on 95. I'm staying on the highway. I didn't know if I should pull off." "Stay on the highway. Keep moving. Don't stop." He checked the time against the 14-minute window. "There's someone coming toward you. He'll make contact in about 6 minutes. When a silver car pulls alongside you and flashes its lights twice, slow down and let it get ahead of you. Then follow it." "Lucien." Her voice had dropped. Quieter. He could hear underneath the control the specific fear of a woman alone on a dark highway, 7 months pregnant with a car behind her whose intention she did not know. "What did we do?" Though we landed in the car like something physical. He looked at the concrete column in front of the Suburban, at the fluorescent light flickering slightly at the far end of the level, at Kyle sitting across from him, watching the structure's entrance with the patient attention of a professional. "We made a mess," he said. "I'm cleaning it up." "The baby is fine," he said. "You're going to be fine. Keep driving. Watch for the silver car." He started to hang up. "Lucien." "I'm here. Come back," she said. Not a demand, not a negotiation, just the 2 words. in the voice of a woman who had spent 14 months building an exit strategy and was now, on a dark highway, asking the man she had been preparing to leave to please still exist in the morning. He held the phone. "I'm working on it," he said. He hung up. Kael's phone buzzed. The old man looked at the screen. His expression shifted, not into alarm, but into the specific recalibration of someone updating a tactical picture. "White Plains," Kael said. "My man is in the building. And Greenpoint, moving into position." He paused. "There's a complication." "Tell me." "Driscoll isn't at the warehouse," Kael said. "My man can see Enzo through a ground floor window. 2 guards. But Driscoll himself left the location 20 minutes ago in a separate vehicle." He looked up. "He's not where we thought he was." Lucian stared at him. "Where is he?" he said. Kael was already on his phone, texting rapidly, his face tight with the focused urgency of a man who has just discovered that the most dangerous element of the problem is not where the problem was supposed to be. The reply came. Kael read it. He looked at Lucian with an expression that contained, for the first time tonight, something that was not operational composure, but something more primary. Something that looked, in the fluorescent light of a Brooklyn parking structure, like genuine alarm. "He's not in Brooklyn," Kael said. "He's on Route 95 northbound." Lucien's hand was on the door before Kael finished the sentence. The cold metal of the handle against his palm, the case on the seat, Serafina's voice still in his ear. "Come back!" And Driscoll somewhere on a dark highway between them, and the silver car still 6 minutes out, and everything that mattered in the world compressed into the distance between. The door was open and the cold air hit him, and Kael's hand came down on his arm. Not grabbing, not restraining, just landing there with the specific weight of a man who needed him to stop moving for 3 seconds. "You can't drive to Connecticut," Kael said. "You don't have a car and you don't have time, and if you're on that highway on foot, you're a target with no cover." His voice was even, operational. The voice of a man managing a situation, not a person. "Sit down. Let me work the problem. Driscoll is on the highway." "I know where Driscoll is." Kael was already on his phone. "My man in White Plains is 20 minutes from the 95 interchange. I'm redirecting him now." He made the call. Spoke in the shorthand again, 3 sentences, hung up. "He'll intercept. Driscoll doesn't know him. He's not on any list Croft compiled. And if he doesn't get there in time, then we deal with what happens after." Kael looked at him directly. "You cannot do anything useful in the next 15 minutes by moving. The most useful thing you can do is stay in this car and be ready to move when there's something to move toward." Lucian stood with the door open and the cold pouring in Kael's hand on his arm, and the fluorescent light of the parking structure making everything look slightly unreal, slightly overexposed, the way the world looks when the adrenaline is very high and the body has been running on it for too long. He got back in the car, closed the door. The driver, the woman with the gray hair and the forgettable face, was watching him in the rearview mirror with the calm attention of someone who had seen this kind of moment before and understood that it was not her moment to speak. He called Serafina. She answered on the first ring. "Still driving," she said immediately. "The car is still behind me." "How far?" 3 car lengths. "It was further back before, it's closer now." He looked at Kael. Kael was tracking something on his phone, face tight, thumb moving. "Where's the silver car?" Lucian said to Kael. 11 minutes out, Kael said without looking up. 11 minutes. Serafina had been on the highway for, he did the arithmetic, at least 20 minutes since the rest stop, which put her somewhere past exit 52, which meant the distance between her and the interchange where Kael's man could intersect was compressing. "Serafina," he said, "I need you to do something, and I need you to do it without asking me why. Tell me. Take the next exit, whatever exit comes up. Get off the highway." A pause. "You said stay on the highway." "That was before. Take the exit. Find a gas station, a diner, anywhere with people and lights. Get inside and stay visible." "The car behind me. Will follow you off." "Yes, that's what I want." He was watching Kael. "Kael, if she exits, can your man intercept before the exit?" "Depends on which exit." Kael looked up. "Ask her." "What exit is coming up?" Lucian said. "Exit 54, she said. "It's right there. Should I?" Take it, now. The sound of the car decelerating. The turn signal. He could hear it, that small domestic clicking sound, absurdly ordinary in the context of what was happening. The specific sound of a woman who had been practical enough to use her turn signal even in this moment, because Serafina Vale had been raised a certain way, and those things apparently persisted. "I'm on the ramp," she said. "There's a gas station at the bottom of exit 54, the driver said from the front seat. Her first words. Her voice was flat and informational. "On the right, quarter-mile from the ramp. Gas station on the right at the bottom," Lucien told Serafina. "Go there. Go inside. Tell the attendant your car is making a noise and you think it might be serious. Keep the conversation going." "Okay," she said. Her voice had steadied. She was doing what she had always done, taking information, making decisions, acting. "The other car took the exit too. It's 2 car lengths behind me." "I know. Keep moving." Kale was on his phone. "My man is redirecting. He'll hit the exit 54 interchange in 7 minutes. He looked at Lucien. "If Driscoll is in that car, is he?" "I don't know." Kale's jaw was tight. "I know he left the Greenpoint location in a dark vehicle heading north. I don't have a visual confirmation." 7 minutes. Serafina was off the highway. The car had followed. Lucien sat in the parking structure and counted his heartbeats because there was nothing else to count. No other measurement available to him. No lever he could pull in the next 7 minutes that would do anything except make things worse. He had spent 23 years being the person who pulled the levers. Being the person who waited was a different kind of endurance entirely. At minute 4, Kael's phone buzzed. He read the screen. His expression shifted, something releasing in the muscles around his jaw. "White Plains," he said. "My man has the documents." Lucien exhaled. "He's moving them now," Kael said. "The channel I mentioned. The people looking for a reason and a method. They'll have the full Croft documentation within the hour." He put the phone down. "Once they have it, Croft's leverage disappears. He becomes the problem, not you. Everything he's set in motion tonight becomes a liability for him." And Driscoll. Without Croft authorizing and funding the operation, Driscoll has no standing. He's a private contractor running an unsanctioned action. If Croft is being managed from the other direction, Driscoll will pull back. Kael paused. Professionals pull back when the contract becomes a liability. 3 more minutes. Lucien kept the line to Serafina open. He could hear the gas station, ambient sound, a door chime, the indistinct audio of a public space, her voice asking someone something about a noise from the engine, the attendant's response. Ordinary sounds. The sounds of a world continuing to operate normally around a situation that was anything but. His phone buzzed. Kael's man. On location. I see the subject inside. Dark vehicle in the lot. 1 occupant. Stationary. Then 90 seconds later, occupant made a call. Now moving. Vehicle pulling out of lot heading south toward on-ramp. Lucien read it twice. He looked at Kael. Driscoll got a call, Lucien said. Croft, Kael said. Pulling him back. The documents moved faster than I expected. He checked his phone. My contact at the channel confirmed receipts 11 minutes ago. Croft would have known within minutes after that. He sat back. For the first time in 2 hours, something in his posture changed. Not relaxation exactly, but the specific release of a man whose operational tension has found a resolution to focus on. It's over. The active threat is over. Lucien put the phone to his ear. Serafina. I'm here. Her voice was different, still controlled, but the effortful quality was gone. The car left. I know. Is it finished? The immediate part. Yes. A long pause. The door chime of the gas station as someone entered, the attendant saying something she didn't respond to. Are you all right? She said. He looked at the concrete column, at the fluorescent light, at Kael sitting across from him with the steady, exhausted patience of a 73-year-old man who had spent 50 years in a world that extracted its costs without sentiment. I will be, he said. Enzo, she said. His name, just that. My people are moving on Greenpoint now, he said. The guards there don't have a reason to hold him anymore. He'll be out within the hour. Tell me when you know. I will. He hung up. The call to Greenpoint came at 11:47 p.m. Enzo had been held for 3 hours and 40 minutes in a warehouse that smelled of river water and machine oil, zip-tied to a chair with his coat still on, interrogated by two men who understood enough about the organization's structure to ask coherent questions, but not enough to understand that Enzo Falcetti had been answering and not answering questions from dangerous people since before either of them was born. He was dehydrated. His wrists were marked, and he had a bruise along his left jaw that would take 2 weeks to fully fade. He was otherwise intact. When Lucien arrived at the location where Kael's man had brought him, a medical office in Williamsburg owned by a doctor who understood discretion as a professional value, Enzo was sitting in a chair with an ice pack against his jaw and a cup of water in his hand, and the specific expression of a man who is taking stock of the situation with total unsentimental clarity. Lucien sat across from him. They looked at each other. "The jaw," Lucien said. "It's fine." Enzo moved it deliberately, testing. "I've had worse." "I know." "The Driscoll man who did it had small hands," Enzo said. "It was embarrassing for him." Something that might have been a different thing in a different night moved briefly through Lucien's chest. "I should have told you about Ashby," Enzo said. The directness of it, no preamble, no deflection, was so characteristic of the man that it landed more heavily than an apology would have. "The error was mine. I've been making decisions about what information was relevant for 50 years, and this time I was wrong. I needed to tell you that directly." "You did tell me directly," Lucien said. "In the car, with everything already on fire." Enzo shifted the ice pack. "I should have told you 3 months ago when I first heard about the Baltimore matter. I made a judgment call about relevance, and I was wrong." "Yes," Lucien said. "You were." The words sat in the room, not cruelly, just accurately. "And Croft," Enzo said. "Being managed. The documentation is in the right hands now. By morning his exposure will be sufficiently concrete that he won't be able to move without making it worse." Enzo nodded slowly. "And the organization?" "Intact," Lucien said. "Bruised. There will be conversations. Benedetti, the others who heard something tonight. We'll have those conversations." He paused. "The financial structure needs to be rebuilt. Some of it was too exposed by what Serafina's team compiled. That will take time." "How much?" "A year. Maybe 2. "The Valdez arrangement." "Suspended?" Lucien said. "Permanently. It's not survivable in the current environment, and it was never worth the exposure it carried." He paused. "That should have been true before tonight. I chose convenience. That was my error." Enzo looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded once, the slow nod of a man who has just heard an accountability that he had not expected to hear and is receiving it with the appropriate gravity. "Your wife," Enzo said. "In Connecticut. I need to get to her tonight." "Go," Enzo said. "I'm fine. The doctor is thorough." He waved the ice pack slightly. "Go." Lucien stood. He looked at the old man, at the bruised jaw, the ice pack, the cup of water, the coat that had been through a warehouse in November and still retained its shape with a kind of stubborn dignity that was entirely consistent with its owner. 50 years, Lucien said. 51, Enzo said. I started with your father in 74. When this settles, when the organization is stable and the Benedetti conversations are done, you should go to Florida. Enzo looked at him. Are you retiring me? I'm suggesting that a man who has done 51 years in this life has earned the right to sit in the sun without someone zip-tying him to a chair. A pause. Then, from Enzo, something that was the closest thing to a smile the man's face seemed capable of producing. Ask me in the spring, he said. Cale drove him to Connecticut, not the woman with the gray hair. Kael himself, in a different vehicle, a nondescript American sedan that smelled of coffee and old upholstery, on the interstate going north with the city receding in the mirrors and the November darkness on all sides. They didn't talk much. The situation had been talked through and the talking was finished, and what remained was the specific quiet of two people who had been through something together and were now on the other side of it, in the particular silence that comes after. At one point, somewhere past the state line, Kael said, Your father would have handled it the same way. Lucien looked at the dark road. He would have handled it earlier, he said. Maybe. Cale paused. He also would have made the same mistake with the woman. He had a weakness for separating his lives. Thought if the walls were high enough, nothing would cross. He was quiet for a moment. Nothing stays separated, it never does. The walls just determine how bad the breach is when it comes. Lucien said nothing. She's strong, Cale said. Your wife. The plan she built? I've seen professionals do worse. I know. You underestimated her. Yes. Your father did the same thing with your mother, Cale said. It was the consistent error of the generation. He said it without judgment, just as a fact, delivered by a man who had watched enough families to understand their patterns across time. They arrived at the Vale estate at 2:40 in the morning. It was a large house set back from the road at the end of a long driveway, the kind of house that had been in a family long enough to accumulate the specific settled quality of belonging. Mature trees, a stone wall along the property line, lights on the ground floor that had been left on, Lucien suspected, not by accident. The driveway crunched under the tires, a sound so specific and domestic that it felt like a different world from the parking structures and warehouses and dark highways of the last 8 hours. Cale stopped the car at the foot of the front steps. I'll wait, he said. Lucien got out. The front door opened before he reached it. Not Serafina. Her mother, a woman in her late 60s named Claudette Vale, who had never in 6 years looked at Lucien with anything other than the careful, neutral regard of a woman who loved her daughter and reserved her judgment. She looked at him now in the porch light, and her expression was different, not warmer, not colder, more direct. The expression of a woman who had spent the last 3 hours with a frightened pregnant daughter and had some questions. She's in the sitting room, Claudette said. He went in. The sitting room was at the back of the house, overlooking what was, in daylight, a garden and a view of the coastline. At 2:40 in the morning, it was dark glass reflecting the room back at itself. Serafina was on the sofa with a blanket over her legs and her shoes off, and a mug of something on the table in front of her. She was not asleep. She looked up when he came in. He sat down across from her. They looked at each other in the lamp-lit sitting room of her parents' house, with the dark coast outside and the sound of the house settling around them, and neither of them spoke for a long moment. Enzo, she said. Fine. Bruised, intact. The documents. In the right hands. Croft will be managed by morning. She nodded. She was watching him with the specific attention she had been applying to him for 2 days, reading his face, looking for the thing underneath the thing being said. But the quality of it was different now, not strategic, something older. You drove 3 hours, she said. Yes. Why? He thought about that. Not the tactical answer, the documents, the situation, the logistics that had put him in a car going north. The real answer, the one that had been assembling itself in the silence of the drive while Cale watched the road and the city disappeared behind them. Because I wanted to see that you were all right, he said, and because I wanted to say something that I should have said before any of this happened and didn't, and I didn't want to say it over the phone. She waited. I built the wrong life, he said. I built the organization, and I built the empire, and I maintained it, and I protected it. And I told myself that the life I had at home was another thing I was maintaining and protecting. And what I didn't see, what I refused to see, was that you are not a structure. You're not a system. You're not something that can be maintained from a distance while you're somewhere else building a fantasy with a woman who hung up on you in 90 seconds when the situation became inconvenient. He stopped. His voice was even, but the evenness cost something. You were right in front of me for 6 years, he said. You were the most capable, patient, strategically sophisticated person I have ever dealt with in any context, and I looked at you every day and saw my wife and did not see the rest of it. That is the error I will not be able to correct. I know that. She was very still. I'm not asking you to come back, he said. The papers are real. The terms are fair. I'm going to call Ashby's office in the morning. Not Ashby, someone clean, and I'm going to sign them. He paused. I'm going to sign them because you built a life you deserve, and it's not the one you've been living. And because Valentina deserves to be born into something stable and real, And because the only way I can do something correct in this situation, after doing so many things wrong, is to give you the exit you built so carefully, instead of fighting it, because my ego refuses to accept that someone beat me. Her jaw moved, not quite speaking, something working in her face that she was controlling very carefully. She's going to know you, Serafina said. Her voice was rough at the edges. Whatever happens between us, she's going to know her father, not through a schedule. She's going to know the actual person. I need you to understand that's what I expect. I understand. And I mean the actual person, she said. Not the boss. Not the man behind the desk. The man who drove 3 hours in the middle of the night because he wanted to say something that mattered. She paused. She deserves that version. He looked at her across the lamplit room. I'll work on it, he said. That's the honest answer. I'll work on it. She looked at him for a long time. Then something in her posture changed. Not collapsing, not softening into forgiveness, but releasing. The specific release of a person who has been carrying an enormous weight for a very long time and has just been told, convincingly, that they can set it down now. There are guest rooms upstairs, she said. You should sleep. You look terrible. I've been awake for... I know how long you've been awake. She pulled the blanket slightly. My mother already made up the blue room. She doesn't do that for people she's decided she doesn't want in the house. He looked toward the hallway, at the stairs visible through the doorway. Kael is outside, he said. Send him home. She picked up her mug. Or tell him there's a room. I don't care. This house has 7 bedrooms, and 3 of them are empty, and it is almost 3 in the morning. He went to the door, stepped onto the porch. Kael's sedan was at the end of the driveway, engine idling, the exhaust visible in the cold air. He walked down. Kael rolled the window down. She's all right, Lucien said. I can see that, Kael said. Go home. You don't need... I know what I need, Lucien said. You've done enough, more than enough. He paused. The balance your father owed mine, consider it cleared. Kael looked at him. In the car's interior light, his face was the face of a man who had carried something for 36 years and had just been told the weight was gone. He absorbed it without ceremony, the way men of that generation absorbed things that mattered. Take care of the girl, Kael said. Yes, Lucien said. The sedan backed out of the driveway and turned onto the dark road, and its taillights moved away and disappeared. Lucien stood at the foot of the stone steps for a moment in the cold. The coast was somewhere beyond the dark garden. He couldn't see it, but he could smell it, the salt, the specific cold weight of ocean air that was different from city air in every quality. He breathed it in, let it settle. He went inside. The blue room was at the end of the upstairs hallway. Clean sheets, a window that faced east, a lamp on the nightstand with a warm bulb. He sat on the edge of the bed and removed his shoes. The same shoes he had put on that morning in the penthouse, which felt like a different calendar year, and lay back without undressing further and stared at the ceiling. He was asleep in under 2 minutes. Asleep without architecture, without the managed distance he normally maintained even unconscious. Just the black, immediate, total sleep of a body that has spent everything it had and has nothing left to spend. In the room at the end of the hall, Serafina lay in her childhood bed, with her hands on her stomach and the mug cooling on the nightstand and the window dark beside her. She was not asleep. She was awake in the specific way of late pregnancy. Not uncomfortable exactly, but vividly present in her body, aware of the weight of the life inside her in a way that 3 a.m. made more acute than any other hour. Valentina moved, a small interior motion, one of the rolling adjustments that had become familiar over the last 2 months. Serafina put her palm flat against the curve of her stomach and felt it. She thought about the consultation firm in White Plains that had been incorporated 8 months ago under a name that no one would look at twice. She thought about Marcus and his 2 large glasses and his 10-year-old Volvo and the forensic patience that had built something extraordinary out of public records and inference, and the specific love of a younger brother for an older sister who had always, he felt, been in a situation she deserved better than. She thought about the receipt from the perfumery, April of last year, the black gift bag with the ribbon. The way she had felt standing in the kitchen that morning with the receipt in her hand. Not rage, not yet. Something quieter and more devastating. The specific feeling of a truth that you have been half knowing for a long time suddenly becoming fully known. She had set the receipt down, folded it carefully along its original crease, put it in the small box in her dresser where she kept things she was not ready to deal with, and then she had gone about the day. The days after that had required a kind of sustained endurance that she had not known she possessed. 14 months of mornings where she woke up and made a choice, not to act yet, not until the picture was complete, not until she knew everything she needed to know to do this correctly, to do it safely, to do it in a way that protected her daughter and herself without destroying everything blindly in an act of grief. She had been in a quiet war with herself every day for 14 months, and the self that wanted to stop building the case and simply burn something down had lost every single morning to the self that understood that burning things down without a plan was how people got hurt. That patience had saved her life tonight. She understood that now in a way she hadn't when she was building the case, when it was theoretical. The precision of the documentation, the structure that had made it simultaneously a weapon and a shield, had given Lucian something to use tonight when the situation went wrong in ways neither of them had anticipated. She had not planned to save him, but the tool she built to protect herself had done it anyway. She lay in the dark thinking about this for a long time. In the weeks that followed, the filing moved through its legal process without contest. Lucien's attorney, a woman named Park, who came recommended through a channel entirely outside his previous legal circle, reviewed the terms and told him they were among the most equitable she had seen in a case of this financial complexity, which meant, she did not say, but which he understood, that the person who had drafted them had been thinking about fairness rather than victory. He signed them on a Tuesday morning in Park's office on the 41st floor of a building in Midtown. He read every page first. He did not perform reluctance. He signed where indicated and initialed where required, and when it was done, he sat for a moment with the pen in his hand and looked out the window at the city and thought about his father's clock, which was still in the study of the penthouse, still wound, still running. He would take it with him when he left the penthouse. That was the one thing he was certain he was taking. The organization survived. The financial restructuring took 14 months, 2 months longer than he had estimated, and cost him a significant portion of the leverage he had spent years accumulating in certain markets. The Valdez arrangement was permanently dissolved. 3 of the 12 names on the index card became the foundation of a rebuilt inner circle that was smaller and more carefully constructed than what had preceded it. Benedetti, after 3 meetings and a great deal of careful management, concluded that stability had been restored. He never learned the full scope of what had happened. Croft resigned from his position in March. The official reason was health. The unofficial reason was understood by everyone who needed to understand it and by no one else. He moved to a property in Portugal that had been purchased under a name that was not his and was not heard from again in any capacity that mattered. Driscoll retired from private contracting and opened a security consulting firm in Phoenix that did legitimate work for corporate clients and made a modest, unremarkable living. Ashby was disbarred 18 months later in a proceeding related to the Baltimore matter. He had not, in the end, been a plant or a deliberate trap. He had simply been a man with prior commitments who had made a self-interested decision when presented with relevant documentation. It was the most ordinary of betrayals. Not loyalty to an enemy, but the simple arithmetic of self-preservation. And understanding it as such made it neither better nor worse than it had seemed at the time. Enzo went to Florida in April. He bought a small house in Sarasota with a garden that faced west and watched the Gulf of Mexico sunsets with the patient, unsentimental attention he had applied to everything else in his life. He called Lucienne on the first Sunday of every month. The calls lasted approximately 12 minutes. They talked about the organization and about Valentina and occasionally about his father, and the calls were not warm in any demonstrative sense, but they were real in a way that warmth alone could never achieve. Valentina arrived on a Wednesday in December, 8 days past her due date, in a hospital on the Connecticut shore with her grandmother in the waiting room and her father in the delivery room, which had not been the plan, which had required a conversation at 38 weeks in Serafina's kitchen during one of the Tuesday dinners that had become a quiet, unmarked habit in the months since the filing. Dinners that were not reconciliation and not performance, but simply the ongoing practical reality of 2 people who were no longer married and were still, permanently and without alternative, connected. He had asked if he could be there. She had looked at him across the kitchen table for a long moment. "Yes," she said. He was there. He held his daughter for the first time at 4:18 in the morning on a Wednesday in December in a room that smelled of antiseptic and the specific human exhaustion of labor, and Valentina Moretti weighed 7 pounds 4 ounces and had her mother's dark hair and an expression of profound irritation at the circumstances in which she found herself that Lucien recognized from somewhere and could not immediately place. He stood at the window with her while Serafina slept, the deep, annihilating sleep of a body that had just done something enormous, and looked at the early winter dark outside and at the small face in his arms, and the city was not visible from this window, only the coastline, the flat dark water of the Sound extending to the horizon, and for the first time in as long as he could clearly remember, the absence of the city felt like something other than displacement. It felt like room. He had spent 23 years building something that had nearly destroyed everything it was supposed to protect. He understood this now not as an abstraction, but as a physical fact, the way you understand something that has passed through your body, the knowledge that lives in scar tissue rather than memory. He did not know what came next. That was the truth of it. He had a daughter and a fractured empire and a restructured organization and a penthouse he was going to leave and a study with a clock that had belonged to his father. He had 12 names on an index card, 3 of which still mattered. He had a woman who was no longer his wife and who had built, with extraordinary precision and patience, the mechanism of her own freedom, and who sat across from him on Tuesday evenings in her mother's kitchen in Connecticut and talked to him about their daughter with the direct, unsentimental practicality of someone who had decided to deal with what was real. He did not know what came next, but he was holding something real. Valentina made a small sound, not distress, not hunger, something more preliminary than either, the particular inarticulate announcement of a person who has just arrived in the world and is still determining what she thinks of it. He adjusted his hold, felt the weight of her redistribute, settle, find its balance against his arm. "I know," he said quietly. To her, to the window, to the dark water beyond it. "I know." Outside, the sky was beginning to change at its eastern edge, barely, almost imperceptibly, the first gray suggestion of a morning coming in off the water. The same change he had watched from a study 43 floors above the city, in another life. What felt like years ago, but was only weeks. He watched it come. He did not look away.